with Politics Live.
President Trump says he has the makings of a deal over Greenland and he now won't bring in tariffs on the UK and others. Why has he backed down? Welcome to Politics Live. This is Vicky Young. Joining me, Labour MP Laura Kirk-Smith, Conservative peer James Bethell and Ava Santina Evans from Politics Joe. And our economics editor is live in Davos to tell us about the President's change of heart. Plus,
today we're announcing more details regarding the Board of Peace, so important. This board has the chance to be one of the most consequential bodies ever created.
President Trump has persuaded some world leaders to join his Board of Peace. What is the organisation trying to achieve?
My Lords, they have voted content 261, not content 150. The contents have it.
Peers have voted to ban social media for under 16s. Will the government listen? The musician Brian Eno will join us live. He says it's time to tax the super rich. Stay tuned for that. And we want to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on those stories or questions for our panel, we want to hear your voice. You can get in touch using the details on screen now, and we look forward to hearing from you. Well, it's been quite a week in Davos at the World Economic Forum. President Trump's words and actions have caused quite a stir, and it's a fluid situation, shall we say. The threat of tariffs on the UK and others seems to have gone away. Let's look at this post from the President on Truth Social. We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February the 1st. The President was also asked about this by reporters.
Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
Some nice soothing background music there to introduce our economics editor, Faisal Islam, who is in Davos for us. Faisal, do we have any idea what the details of this deal involve?
I think all our heads need soothing with more than music right now after the past 24 hours. Sort of. I mean, we have, I suppose what I would say is we have the President of the United States, Donald Trump's account of what he thinks a deal is, or a framework. I'm sorry, that's a slightly more complicated explanation than announcing a deal. He said everything was fine, deal done, off we go. Then he said tariffs were off the table. So I think the tangible thing here is he's taken tariffs off the table. The wider thing here, as he announced in his speech, is the idea of using an invasion seems to be off the table. But it's worth just pausing there. The idea that it was ever on the table is obviously, and I use my words guardedly here, totally insane, right? But it became a conversation point here, and so much so that it spooked the markets, so much so that it yielded a reaction, a serious reaction, obviously, from world leaders that Donald Trump said that he'd watched, and it obviously affected him because you heard his quotes about them. You know, slightly spiky in terms of Emmanuel Macron and Mark Carney. And I should say on that note, we've just heard a really remarkable speech from the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz making his debut here too. And I just want to read this quote to you because it sounds like jape sometimes, like a joke, but it's really serious, this stuff. And when you hear this from the German Chancellor about, you know, a world with no rules, where might is right. A world where only power matters always starts by crushing small countries, then moves up the food chain and eventually eats the giants too. Germany tried this once. It ended with ruins, guilt, and a global warning. Okay, so you get the sense here of the different worlds surrounding the same fact. So yes, there's a deal, there's been pressure. It seems to be on a lower tempo. No one knows what happens next. But there are very serious points here of global security and the precedents being set too.
And also, slightly related to all of this, of course, is this Board of Peace that the president has launched. I mean, what do we know about that organisation?
Well, we heard this morning from the Foreign Secretary here, who said that the UK would not be joining that Board of Peace. The Board of Peace sort of rooted in the Gaza reconstruction effort, very unconventional, involving private sector, old prime ministers, countries spread out from Gaza now, apparently, is the theory. It's had its inauguration here attended by some world leaders. Here's what we heard here. We heard from Yvette Cooper this morning, but we also heard privately from dozens of European countries who said they were essentially coordinating a boycott of this because they would not let global security be privatised. So again, the sort of comical story is that Donald Trump is snubbed. The serious story is that they're very worried that very important things like the reconstruction of Gaza are sort of in very unaccountable, strange organisations. It's quite something, therefore, to see the UK government kind of come out pretty strongly. We're now seeing a pattern here. I think it's pretty clear there. And just on that, particularly for your viewers and your panel, I just want to relay this story. You know, this story of sort of UK now willing to call out the US a bit more. I was doing a live in the middle of the tumult as Donald Trump arrived. And one of his aides, and it's interesting because, you know, BBC and the Trump administration, interesting dynamic, just came bounded straight up to me, smiling. And he could see I'd been trying to shout questions to members of Trump's administration. And he was just laughing his head off, saying, ha, 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 Diego Garcia. And it seemed like to them this was part of a game, a bit of leverage for the against the UK, because Trump had seen what Keir Starmer had said and didn't like what he heard. So there's a strange world of reality here. It's like Trump has brought a TV show to a very serious summit. No one knows which way to look. And the combination of the two is quite mind-boggling. We'll try to continue decoding it.
Yeah, Faisal, thank you so much for that and for all your contributions. Bring us up to date with what's been going on there. As you say, slightly mind-boggling in Davos this week. Let's start with Greenland, shall we, Laura, in terms of the president backing down. Why do you think he's done that?
Well, I think the fact he's done that really does vindicate the approach that the Prime Minister has been taking, which is to remain quite cool, quite level-headed, quite rational and calm, and to pursue the really serious work of diplomacy behind the scenes to get us to the point that we've got to now. I think it's a recognition, I hope, that for Donald Trump as well as for ourselves, preserving that relationship between the US and the UK, between the US and Europe is really important. I think Trump has realised there are other ways to pursue his interests that don't involve disrupting what's a really important relationship, not just from a security perspective, but a much deeper and long-standing relationship from an economic perspective, from a trade perspective, from an intelligence perspective. So I think we've got to a good point in it, and I think it is really good because what we've seen is that while the Prime Minister is building those relationships, as you have to in diplomacy, he is willing to stand up for what's right. He's done that. He was very, very clear that the future of Greenland is for the Danes and the Greenlanders to decide. He's stuck to that principle, and it's been, I think, important for people to see that he will be robust when he needs to be.
OK, well, the Prime Minister has just spoken about all of this. Let's have a quick listen to Keir Starmer.
You may have seen, but it is a good thing, that yesterday the threat of tariffs against the United Kingdom was lifted, and now we can start the hard yards of finding a way forward on security in the Arctic, which may seem a long way away, pretty remote, but actually does matter to all of us in terms of the safety and security of our country. And we've got through the last few days with a mix of British pragmatism, common sense, but also that British sense of sticking to our values and our principles.
James, is that how you see it?
He's done a good job of remaining calm, like Laura said, but the idea that we're returning to a rules-based world peace, I think isn't right. Mark Carney put it very differently. He says it's a complete reboot, that we now have to be resilient nations capable of looking after our own food, energy and security. That's what I think is the new agenda. And I think it is a moment when Keir Starmer could be articulating that it has massive implications for this country. We are not a resilient country. I know that, having been a minister during COVID. It's quite wobbly out there. So we need to do some hard work to reboot the way we do things. And that's the kind of rhetoric I'd like to be hearing from Keir Starmer.
And Ava, people are talking about a rupture, aren't they? A change in the world order, that the rules going out of the window. How do you see it?
Well, we did already have a change in the world order because we separated ourselves from Europe, and now Keir Starmer finds himself in the, unenviable, position of having to turn back to those allies and suggest, well, actually, maybe we need to have closer cohesion with our closest neighbours. You know, this is a real win, actually, probably for Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats, which you don't often hear. And this is what he has been pushing for a number of years. But this is by no means the end of the tunnel. You know, Keir Starmer is celebrating that we've got the end of tariffs. However, look at that board of peace. Trump is sitting on a stage there with Argentina. He's sitting there with Belarus, with Russia. I mean, what does this mean for the United Kingdom? It's not positive, is it?
And I'd agree that we're certainly not seeing a return to world peace. I think what Mark Carney said and what the German Chancellor has said today is absolutely right. It is a serious moment. The rules-based order as we know it.
In terms of the words they are using there, as Faisal pointed out, it's pretty seismic, isn't it?
Well, and I do think it's a moment where we need to be very, very robust in our defence of both the norms that have underpinned the world-based order as we've known it in recent decades, the norms of sovereignty, of rights, of respect for that, but also the institutions that are there to underpin those norms, the UN, NATO. And I think we've got to be very robust that actually it's in our own self-interest as well as the global interest in terms of peace and security to uphold those norms and to uphold those rules that we're used to.
Mark Carney in Canada has brought in a review of the energy policy, has already increased money to the military, not promised it in several years' time, and is thinking about food and energy security in a different way. That is already in motion. But we're not hearing that at all. Quite the opposite. On energy, there's a doubling down on the existing plan. On security, there's no money coming through to the military. We know that for sure.
On defence, we've made a commitment to increase the spending up to 5%.
I know, it's a commitment.
And it will be 3% by the next Parliament. We are moving as quickly as we can to get that spending in place.
Warehouses that should be full of bullets and shells that are stark empty and have no lorries coming to them at all.
I think reflects the really depleted state of the armed forces that we inherited as a government. Of course, it takes time to scale up, to get that right strategy in place, to get the investment in place, and that's underway. But I think we'll see quite a radical shift in our.
I think it's just this question of urgency and whether we're really seeing grip and a sense of pivot from the government, or whether we're seeing wishful thinking and a hope that some of these problems will go away.
I think we're seeing grip. I think we have no choice but to grip it in the way we are.
How do you think the government's handling this? That sense of urgency James is talking about. Are we actually dealing with this robustly enough?
Well, on defence, if you're talking about radical change, are you planning to change the way in which we operate our nuclear functions? You know, are you going to change Trident? Because at the moment we are in lieu to the Americans with that equipment. Radical change would suggest that we can't trust Donald Trump at this time. And so perhaps we need to be looking after our own security rather than being in lieu to the US.
I don't think we're in lieu to anyone. I think we're committed to the nuclear deterrent. I think that's a really important part of our of keeping us secure in the world. I think we will see that spending. I think. And I think the other thing we're doing, as well as, and we are looking carefully at our own energy security and investing in renewables and investing in our domestic energy capabilities.
I'm not sure
same
if
with food security, but I think across the piece, we
are pulling out of the North Sea, and we haven't put any new structures up. We haven't seen renewable energy suddenly, built all over the country. So
it doesn't happen that quickly, but we've laid the groundwork. We've put the GB energy in place.
Well, I was interviewing Ed Miliband not so long ago, and it was very difficult to point to sites where there were actual evidence of laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
And there is gas under the ground that could be got out in a year or two, yet we've completely ruled out any kind of onshore gas development. That is not taking the world as it is today seriously, surely.
I think there's what Ed Miliband has set out is what will, over the next few years, unlock a remarkable transition in our move.
Plan. It just hasn't started yet. That's the problem.
Well, the work has been done in Parliament. We moved very quickly to get GB energy in place to allow us to then make those investments into the infrastructure. Of course, it's going to take time to shift, but we've been working at pace and from a very low base again in terms of
tomorrow?
what we
Go on. I just wanted to talk about the Board of Peace before we run out of time on this. Let's have a quick listen to Donald Trump on that.
And now we have one of the most important meetings of all, the official formation of what is known as the Board of Peace. I want to thank the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and their extraordinary work. I mean, they have done an amazing job. We have peace in the Middle East. Nobody thought that was possible. We've settled 8 wars, and I believe another one's coming pretty soon. You know what that is? The one that I thought was going to be an easy one has turned out to be probably the most difficult.
Some contested claims there from President Trump. Ava, what do you make of this board of peace?
Well, can we talk about the peace in the Middle East? What on earth is he talking about? America are sending, there are ships heading, allegedly, for Iran, if the trackers are to be believed. If you look over at Israel, Gaza, Israel has still been bombing the Gaza Strip, while we haven't been speaking about it perhaps as loudly as we should have been doing in the media over here. I don't know what peace he's talking about in the Middle East. Perhaps he thinks if he can sort of, pull up a curtain or he can gaslight us, then maybe we'll believe it's true.
James?
I think, slightly overstating, he has made some progress, but I look at that range of world leaders and it chills me. These are not reliable people for whom the world should depend on its security. And he's shaking up old institutions which themselves were past their sell-by date, but replacing it with something that is clearly shonky, and that is troubling.
Laura?
I'm yet to be convinced that the Board of Peace is the right way forward. I think if we go back to what we're actually trying to achieve, which is sustaining what's an incredibly fragile peace settlement in Gaza at the moment, we've got to ask ourselves what are the right ways of achieving the ends that we want to see there, which is a sustained ceasefire, the flood of aid in, the Palestinian Committee that will run Gaza in place. Will the Board of Peace achieve that? I'm not yet convinced, but I'm all up for diplomatic tools and some creativity with that if it helps us achieve those desired ends.
OK, let's talk about the House of Lords last night, which voted to bring in a ban for under-16s on social media. This is an amendment to a bill that's going through Parliament. It would need to go through the House of Commons. The government has got a review, a consultation on all of this, which will take 3 months. We're joined by Paddy Crump in the studio, who is from FlipGen, which is an organisation that I think supports young people to have a healthier relationship with the digital world. What is your view on a ban for the under-16s on social media?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I think, first of all, I have utmost respect for everybody on both sides of the debate. But my view and our view at FlipGen is that blanket bans for under-16s on social media isn't the right way to go. We're for a change in the status quo. The status quo isn't working. The young people are getting harmed all the time online. But we don't believe that a blunt response like the blanket ban is the way forward.
So what would be something you would like to see instead of that, given you do want to see something done?
Yeah, I think safety by design is the key thing. It means everybody is safer online, over 16s, under 16s, anybody who's going online. I think that it's questionable whether under 16s will actually not go online if a ban comes in. So safety by design is the only way to ensure that everybody's safer.
Laura, the government is running this consultation. What's your view on whether there should be a ban?
Personally, I think it is a good option, and I'm glad that it's on the table, as it were, in the consultation that the government's running. But it's a really broad consultation, and I think FlipGen are right in saying that there are lots of different ways of tackling this, and we need to be really sure that we're taking the right way forward. So there are some measures in there that we will take immediately. We're asking Ofsted to inspect schools more closely to make sure that that smartphones aren't visible in the classroom or in schools at all during school hours. And we're moving straight ahead with this guidance, putting guidance in place for screen time for under 5s. There are really worrying developments with that young age group in terms of the amount of screen time. So we'll take those measures, and then there's lots more that we're looking at over the next few months in the consultation, including the ban on social media for under 16s, potentially, including looking at whether we need to raise the age of digital consent up to 16, including looking at some of these features that make social media apps so addictive, looking at the algorithms, looking at some of that functionality and seeing if that needs to change. So we will take it in the round. We'll make sure, I think, that we do it in close consultation with young people, with the many brilliant campaign organisations that are out there.
OK. James, you're in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Well, Paddy is right that the gold standard is safety by design. Yeah. And I voted for that. And I worked really hard on the Online Safety Act. But it hasn't worked. Those companies are not working in partnership with government, with parents, with children. In fact, they are targeting their algorithms. They're allowing the filth and the predators to target our children. The sheer screen time that our children are spending is hitting their cognitive ability and also their mental health. It really is getting worse, and the tsunami of AI heading at our children is going to make things even worse. So last night I did vote for preventing social media from being in the hands of under 16-year-olds because we need a reboot. That relationship with the tech companies has got to be on a more mature, collaborative and partnership basis. And if they can't do that, then they shouldn't be allowed near our children. And Paddy's right. There will be nice things that children would like that will be taken away from them. But right now, the harms are just too great. So that's why I support the ban.
What do you say to that?
I think I agree with the majority of what you said. I think we both want the same thing. And everybody campaigning wants the same thing. But I see a ban as just moving the harm. Young people will still be accessing these places online. In Australia, the ban covers 10 of the main platforms, but young people can use other platforms, online gaming, online forums that aren't covered. And I just think that the ban just kind of moves that harm to these places. And if we're going to ban social media and ban this way of communicating, then I think the lack of third spaces for young people needs to be addressed as well, because it's very well taking away the main form of communication for young people. But actually, what are we giving young people back to be able to go and still have that socialising with their peers that has kind of gone in the last 20 years?
Ava?
I would suggest a more radical approach to social media companies. I think, at the moment, sites like X, sites like Facebook, they're described as tech companies. That's how they trade with the United Kingdom. That's how they pay tax in the United Kingdom, when actually they should be defined as publishers, and they should be responsible for what is published on their social media sites, on their site. So, for example, let's just pick an institution like The Times. The Times has to be very careful about what it publishes because it's responsible for any harm that it might publish. It can't turn around tomorrow and portray 5 young men doing Nazi salutes. And that's what we saw for the past week on sites such as X and Facebook. Wall-to-wall coverage of 5 young men doing a Nazi salute. Why on earth is that legal in the United Kingdom? And it's legal because they're a tech company rather than a publisher.
And the rules that apply to the real world should apply in the digital world. It seems extraordinary to me that you can get away. I don't want to list all the horrific things that happen on X, but why do they get away with that? If you and me tried to do that on the streets of London, we'd be arrested.
Absolutely.
This is the reset that we need, and Paddy makes his point very well, but we do need a brutal reset, and that's what the purpose of this amendment is.
So the Online Safety Act, which you've mentioned, is that it's already out of date? Is that what you're saying?
Listen, it's always difficult for legislation to keep up with changing technology, and yes, it is a bit out of date. But I think it is misconceived because it depends on honest collaboration with an industry that is optimised for profit and has algorithms that are designed to target children's attention and to escalate the controversial nature of the content.
So if those companies won't play ball, what do you do?
Well, then
you must tax them, you must punish them fiscally, you must punish them financially, because these companies are making money out of children's attention and out of children's distress. So a child will be viewing this harmful content, such as the Nazi salutes, and who makes money? X or Facebook. But the Exchequer over here in the United Kingdom, I mean, they receive about 2% in terms of tax every single year. So it's just totally outweighed at the moment. I'd say just fiscal punishment.
Lisa Nandy was sitting where you were sitting yesterday, the Culture Secretary. She didn't really sound that keen on a ban. Do you think the government is maybe not going to go down that road? The Conservatives have obviously said that they do want a ban.
Yeah, I think there are different views, and it's good that we're having a debate about it. I also think it's not necessarily either or. I think a ban is really important because it sets a tone and it sets an expectation, and it does that job, I think, of just helping us shift societal norms towards where I think we all agree they need to be, which is making these online harms unacceptable. But I think you can also take other action with technology companies. You can look at some of these addictive design features. You can look at how they're funded and what they can and can't do. I think we may see a whole range of measures, and I think we'll just work through those at the moment.
But what would you do for the pupils who are in year 10 or 11? I'm sorry, I don't know the exact year. Say where one half of the year group has turned 16 and they're all on social media, and then you've got the other half of the year group who aren't on it. What would you do?
And other I think this cliff edge argument...
I would say alcohol was less harmful than social media in its current state.
But the cliff edge argument is a little bit of a distraction. There are all sorts of cliff edges in life of one kind or another. Suddenly half of them will be driving cars as well.
But you don't get bullied for not driving, do you?
The real issue is, at the moment, kids who are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, those are the ones where their brains haven't fully developed, where their sexuality hasn't developed, where they're vulnerable. Those are the people who we really do need to protect. I think a question that is asked is, if we feel this way about children of 16, are we really going to give them the vote? Because what this puts a spotlight on is how delicate the child mind is and how little they want to be involved in this adult world.
And we're agreeing a lot today.
Paddy, in terms of young people getting round the rules, because that's what we're hearing about, aren't we, with Australia? And, we know, I mean, you mentioned alcohol. Well, we know what happens, they get round the rules, don't they? So is that something that you think would happen if there was a ban?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that if it's just taken away overnight, then young people are tech savvy. We've grown up in a world where, I had social media since 11, like before I should have had it. And, I think people forget how clever young people are at getting around these things, VPNs, and also the fact that overnight new social media can develop and new platforms can kind of become established, and young people can move on to them. And I don't think people will continue to speak, young people continue to go to school, and they'll find other ways to talk. I think in Australia, WhatsApp isn't in that in the ban, but WhatsApp now has stories and some of the features that we see with Instagram and Snapchat. And I just see that the harms that are happening on Instagram and some of these other apps will just move to those ones that aren't regulated.
And what about the other thing that young people say is that they use it, some people are using it and not seeing some of this content, they're using it to communicate with each other. They don't pick up the phone to each other. It's all done through these sites, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that part of the debate is there is that benefit of the connection. I have OCD and I went through a really tough time, and I've learned so much more about myself from social media than I have through reading a website or reading a book. And that allowed me to become more confident and empowered, because I realised it wasn't just me. It's not just me having these thoughts. And similarly, I've got a friend who's got long COVID, and it's like a lifeline for her because she can't leave the house a lot of days, and it's the only way she can interact with the outside world. So I think it's really important that if this ban comes in, that we look at how young people can stay connected and build up other avenues for young people to communicate.
James, you've been in Parliament quite a long time. Is your hunch that this is going to come in as a ban? I mean, there are lots of Labour MPs, dozens of Labour MPs who've already said that they back a ban.
Yeah, 60 wrote into the Secretary of State. One thing to note is how popular it is in Australia. So what has happened in Australia is not that all of the young people have moved on to different platforms. I take what Paddy said and that connection that people have, but I don't think young people want to spend 6-7 hours scrolling on social media. For a lot of them, and I'm referring here to the insight from More in Common and from the Children's Commissioner, they deeply resent what social media has done to their collective. And this collective pressure to be constantly performing and connected is something that they'd rather not have. So I think that penny is dropping with the government, and this could be very, very popular. It's become already a doorstep issue that, and Laura, I'd be interested in your views, that mums and dads are raising with politicians. Is the government really going to go into the next election being the ones that said we don't do the ban? Is the next time a young child dies, is the government really going to be saying we've got nothing to do with it and we're washing our hands of this issue? That's going to be a very difficult position to defend.
There was a poll this week, I think, suggesting that something like 60% of 16 to 24-year-olds are supportive of a ban. Right. Many of them having been on social media and experienced the harms firsthand. They're calling for it. Parents are certainly on my case calling for it, rightly so. The schools want help with it. It feels like, I mean, it feels like regardless of where you live in the country and how old you are and what your background is, it's something where people are looking to the government for help and for guidance.
There's real momentum, I think, to answer your question.
OK. Paddy, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about your experience and about what you feel about this. And we'll get you back when we have some kind of resolution to all of this. Thank you. Now, we have a bit of breaking news, and Henry Zeffman, our chief political correspondent, is here to tell us all about it. It involves a former Labour MP, actually, Henry.
That's right. Andrew Gwynn was a Labour MP. He was suspended from the party in February last year, also sacked as a government minister over offensive WhatsApp messages. And ever since, really, there's been speculation that he might stand down as an MP, triggering a by-election for his seat of Gorton and Denton, which is in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester, remember that. That will become important in a moment. Now, it is the widespread expectation of ministers, Labour MPs, officials who we have been speaking to this morning and this afternoon, that Andrew Gwynn is indeed on the brink of standing down from Parliament and triggering that by-election. It is also the widespread expectation that because that parliamentary constituency is in Greater Manchester, that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, a twice attempted Labour leadership candidate in 2010 and 2015, would try to become the Labour candidate in that by-election in an attempt to return to Parliament.
We will keep an eye on this story, and I'm sure there might be some other steps to come on all of this. Thank you very much, Henry. And of course, as we said there, Andrew Gwynn, a former Labour MP, because he had the party whip withdrawn from him. Now, take a look at this headline in The Guardian. It says that nearly 400 millionaires and billionaires are calling for higher taxes on the super rich. This is all to do with the World Economic Forum in Davos, which we've been reporting from, of course, all week, and it's designed to coincide with that. And I'm delighted to say that we are joined now by the musician and artist, Brian Eno, who is one of the signatories of a letter. Thank you for speaking to us today. Tell us what's in the letter and what you're calling for.
Well, the letter essentially says that not all people who could call themselves rich believe that taxation is a bad thing. A lot of us believe that taxation is essential and that it's one of the ways that social mobility is maintained. And it's one of the ways that the natural tendency of rich to get richer, because that's the way capitalism works, is offset. So we're thinking that we would prefer to live in societies where there were good education systems, good health systems, all the other things that you might achieve by taxation. We would prefer that than being a little bit richer than we already are.
We do hear from lots of people who are wealthy that they feel they are already paying their fair share.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? Nobody likes to think that the government might be making the right decision. You know, there's such a strong, especially in England, there's such a strong force from the right in the media to make people think that the rich people get such a bad deal here. We don't get a bad deal at all. We get a very good deal. We pay much less tax proportionately than poor people do. So we really, I think the people who signed this letter, and it was a wide range of people actually from all over the world, some of them very rich people, some of them just moderately well off like I am. We think that it really helps to recirculate money through society rather than to let it gather into sort of toxic pools of political influence, which is what it's been doing for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of this that I was going to ask you about, because the letter also talks about, doesn't it, the super wealthy having a lot of power and media influence. That's something that you're concerned about.
Well, it's the end of democracy. If we let that happen, then the idea of democracy is that one person's vote is as valuable as any other's. That clearly isn't the case when you have people like Elon Musk, who put $250 million into Donald Trump's campaign. And put it directly into people's hands. I mean, this is just old-fashioned corruption to say, vote for him and I'll give you $50,000. It's corruption. It's as simple as that. And we now live in a system that is increasingly corrupt, I think, and it's corrupted by these huge concentrations of money in the hands of very few people.
OK, Brian, stay with us. I just want to bring the panel in here. James, what do you say to that?
Well, it warms the cockles of my heart to hear this fond story of rich people trying to give their money away. And I applaud the humanity and generosity of the spirit of what Brian's talking about. But can I just deliver a hard economic truth, which is that if you bring in super taxes for the wealthy, they will leave this country. They already are in droves. We've got a massive brain and capital drain at the moment. I feel it palpably. Hundreds, thousands of our entrepreneurs, the wealth creators, are moving to Abu Dhabi, to Milan, to Barcelona, to all around the world. I went to an entrepreneurs roundtable at a bank 2 weeks ago. There were 13 impressive entrepreneurs who'd made a business and sold it and were doing the next one. By the end of it emerged, all 13 were based overseas. That's what happens if Brian brings in his super taxes.
But when you Brian, what do you say? So let me just ask Brian to just answer that for a moment, Brian. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm sure it's true that some people are so concerned about the amount of money that they have in the bank that they will move to other countries where that number is a little bit higher. But a lot of people haven't done that, and I think a lot of people wouldn't do that. We have reasons for thinking that this is our community and that's where we would like to live. And I think the people who can get up and move are people who aren't in the least community-minded. What they're worried about is...
They make money.
Sorry?
But they are the wealth creators who create the jobs and pay for the schools and the hospitals. So they may not be to your tastes, but they are very important to the economy.
They're not the wealth creators. The wealth creators are the people who make things, and that's everybody. The wealth creators are the people who keep society running. So the people who you are calling the wealth creators, the ones who take advantage of the fact that society is being maintained by doctors, nurses, policemen, firemen, all the other public servants. So I think we should get rid of that idea that there are a few people at the top of the wealth pyramid who are the ones who make us wealthy. They aren't. They're taking advantage of the situation just as much as any of the rest of us. They're part of the ecosystem. So, okay, so there have been research done on this, how many people would leave the country if taxes went up considerably on the wealthy. And by the way, we're not talking about considerable, huge tax increases. We're talking about 2% on over £10 million. So that affects about 20,000 people. Okay, how many of them would leave if we were able to impose that tax? It turns out to be about 12% of them. Okay, that's a cost, I agree, but it isn't the huge cost that people are always making out, that suddenly everybody rich would suddenly go off and live in Abu Dhabi.
OK, let me just bring in Laura here. Is the government going to listen about a wealth tax?
Well, there was a huge amount of scaremongering about the changes that we made to the non-dom taxes, closing those loopholes. There was this stories then that people were going to flee the country. That's not happened. We've not seen that happen, and the evidence is now there to prove it. I think, to go back to the original question, I think we do need a fairer tax system, absolutely no doubt about that. But if you look at some of what the government has been doing already, it's moving in that direction. Some of the tax changes that we have seen, removing the exemption on private schools, increasing the stamp duty for second homes.
But Brian's talking about incredibly,
well,
millionaires and billionaires. The taxes you're talking about are hitting people who earn far less than that.
Well, for example, the changes that were made in the last budget looking to increase the tax that you pay if you live in a property over 2 million. I mean, these are people who have wealth, who will be subject to higher taxes.
Yeah, but compared to people Brian's talking about, they're actually not that well off at all. Ava?
Yeah, I think that there's a vast difference, isn't there, between, people who are, paying 40% tax probably on their, their 60 grand take-home pay compared to the £10 million in assets that Brian Eno is talking about here. I would just take a real issue with what you had to say about based, because I think what you mean is people don't leave the UK, they don't leave London or our other fantastic cities because they like the amenities here and they like being in the UK. What they do is they move their finances abroad and their children still go to school here and they still use our fantastic doctors and our fantastic hospitals. So I would suggest if we were going to follow what Brian Eno is suggesting here with a super tax, we would also bring in what the US has. If you want to use a country's facilities, then you have to pay tax there regardless about whether you spend 6 months or 4 months or whatever you do during the year. We just need to be stricter with people.
No, it's the idea that you can somehow harden up the rules and prevent entrepreneurs and the wealthy from leaving the country is just not plausible. in particular on inheritance tax, what we have seen is a large number of people moving their residency, often with reluctance, as Brian rightly says. People don't like leaving their communities. But the prospects of paying super taxes on wealth and income is driving a very large number of people out of the country altogether.
No. We're talking about assets that these people have no plan to spend. They have no plan to move this money back through the economy.
That's in your post-capitalist society. But since we live in the market economy, people do value wealth.
I want it to be fairer. You know, the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, I paid more tax proportionally than the Prime Minister did, because a lot of his was capital gains, and a lot of the time he was doing carried interest here and there and da-da-da. Why am I paying more proportional tax than the Prime Minister just because I haven't had the foresight to put my money into stocks and shares?
Let's bring Brian back in here, because he was nodding along to that bit there. And also, Brian, our Labour MP Laura here saying that actually the government has brought in higher taxes, and she talks about the VAT on private schools. There's a mansion tax coming as well. So she says they're already doing this.
To some extent, that's true. And I appreciate the fact that Labour at least is thinking about all of this. But the problem is that wealth is magnetic. It attracts other wealth. So what you have, if you don't constrain it in some way, you have a runaway feedback system where the wealthy keep getting wealthier. Everybody knows this. If you're rich, you can easily start a business because people will lend you money, and you can easily make more money by doing it. It's not rocket science at all. The rich get richer. So the idea of income tax, for example, was to try to say, OK, we know this mechanism exists. We know the rich tend to get richer. So let's somehow even things out a little bit. Let's smooth it out, and let's put some money back into the less well-financed parts of society, because that is actually good for everybody. It's good for businesses because people now have money to buy things. It's good for social mobility because the poorer people can possibly move into better points in society and have influence there, and so on and so on. It's good for everything. It's not about being nasty to rich people. It's saying you're part of an ecosystem and you're behaving badly in that ecosystem.
OK, let's put that to Laura. What do you say? Go further, Brian says.
I think we should keep looking at ways we can make the tax system even fairer. But I do think we have to be careful, because if you look at where wealth taxes have been introduced, and Spain is one example, they've not raised a lot of money for the government. I think it's something like 0.2% of the overall tax base in Spain that's raised via their wealth tax. And there has been a flight of wealthy people and capital from Spain. So we've got to look at other models and be very careful about introducing anything too radical.
James?
No, I think Laura puts it very well. I mean, to answer Eva's question, one of the reasons we can't do that is that people will go to another territory where they pay less tax, and often with reluctance.
Tell them to go.
Well, that's all very well, but when the drain has happened, we had this in the 1970s. I'm old enough, I'm afraid to say, to remember this. I remember my parents buying a house in Morocco and moving there, and when I was a young child, they used to give me cash that I would put inside my underpants in order to get currency out of the... If you start putting up the drawbridges, you're going to have currency flight, you're going to have capital flight, and you're going to have talent flight. We've seen it happen before. I really don't advise it happening again.
I haven't had the second home problem before, though. You know, I think I speak more probably for the more normal people who are a little bit fed up with having so much of their take-home pay usurped by the Exchequer, when there are plenty of people at the top end who could be contributing more.
Brian, just final word to you. We have about 30 seconds left.
I think it's funny, your story of people being so concerned about the amount of money that they have, that they stash it in their underpants to get through. I mean, this is a certain type of person. Not everybody is like that.
It's a little bit unfair, Brian. That is how normal people have their attitude to money. People like to conserve their money. That is a reasonable human thing to do.
OK, thank you to Brian very much for coming on the programme today. Great to talk to you. That is all for today. I'll be back on Monday with more Politics Live at 12:15 here on BBC Two.